इम्प्लीमेंट करेगा।
Well, for more on that story, our correspondent Siddhant Sibal joins us from Hamburg. Siddhant, good afternoon. Siddhant, purely putting at, what's on the agenda now since the meeting is begun and the informal BRICS summit over, has Prime Minister Narendra Modi set the tone of what to expect? He's spoken on all the fronts. Has he set the tone with regards to the BRIC nations, addressing the BRIC nations and also to the summit at large?
Well, very right. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has set the tone and set the agenda for the summit. He said that G20 countries should form a consensus when it comes to the issue of terror and terror financing. So, in a sense, setting a tone. Remember, in 2014, also Brisbane Summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi set the tone on the issue of black money. It was at his insistence that the black money issue was finally included in the communique. So first engagement is over. The next engagement has started. The retreat, that's the informal meet between all the world leaders, has started in the summit venue, and that's expected to continue for approximately 1 to 2 hours. And the agenda of that meet is also on the issue of terror. Terror is an issue which is dominating the agenda, whether it's from Europe or whether it's from South Asia. We have seen a lot of terror attacks in Europe. Paris has seen major attacks. So that's an issue, that's a scourge that has dominated the global discourse and now forming an important part of the G20 conversation when the world's major economy meet. And remember, G20 was a grouping which was formed after the 2008 financial crisis, but the agenda is expanding increasingly. No longer it's just economics, it's more of political. This time around, it's almost no economics, it's only politics, global order, the global dynamics which have been changing, like shifting sands, especially with the new regime change in Washington, new U.S. President Donald Trump taking charge and also withdrawing America from the Paris Climate Change Summit. That was one of the focus of Prime Minister's speech at the informal BRICS meeting, where Prime Minister said that India will implement the Paris Climate Change Agreement in letter and spirit. So strong words coming from India, and India has been saying that it's committed to environment, and this commitment is just not recent. It's a 5,000-year-old commitment of India when it comes to climate change. So India coming out with strong words on climate change also. Other thing which Prime Minister talked was that India is open for business. He said that India is implementing a reform agenda. He talked about GST. Well, remember, GST has been implemented just a week ago, and it is the biggest indirect tax reform the country has ever seen. But G20 talking about a lot of things happening, because this grouping, of course, contains a major portion of the world population, countries producing major economic growth, economic output. And what is decided here in Hamburg will impact every person, whether you're living in New York or New Delhi. So obviously, world is waiting with bated breath. What will be the outcome? What will be the communique? Because there are divisions which exist. There is a common discourse when it comes to terror, but issue of climate change, the issue of trade can dominate the agenda, divide the world. Remember, Prime Minister in his speech at the BRICS meet also talked about protectionism. Prime Minister said that that's an increasingly it's a situation which is increasingly getting the world worried about the situation, because more and more countries are now building barriers when it comes to free movement of trade, free movement of people. And it's worrisome for India, because India is a service center in a sense for the world. There are a lot of people involved in the service industry, and we have seen what has been happening in America, this course of not allowing the people from other countries to work in that country. So obviously there were no names taken by the Prime Minister, but we know what was being discussed, what was being said, and what was the message behind Prime Minister's entire statement, whether it's on terror, whether it's protectionism, whether it's on climate change.
Well, Siddhant, we'll leave it there. The G20 summit meetings set to begin, with the world leaders clearly divided at this point of time on major issues on the agenda, like climate change, global trade and immigration. All three issues where world leaders have a divergent views. We'll try and we'll come back to you time and again for more updates as the meetings progress. Thank you and appreciate your joining us on the phone line there from Hamburg. Meanwhile, earlier in the day, our correspondent Siddhant Sabal did a review of how newspapers in Germany were covering the G20 meet.
Well, today is the first day of the G20 Summit, and that is what is dominating the headlines in all the German newspapers. But it's all about Trump, and Trump, the US president. It's written here, the impossible president, with the photograph of Donald Trump in a Stone Age man dress. So that is what you can get. So he arrived yesterday in the city of Hamburg from Poland, where he made a major speech about civilization, on how saving the Western civilization is the most important thing. And he met the German Chancellor, and this newspaper says that there was a meeting about the summit itself. And lastly, this newspaper talking same about the meet between both the leaders, the US President and the German Chancellor. They have difference of opinion on various issues, including the issue of climate change, because the German Chancellor supports it. She was very angry when the US withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord, and of course that is what one thing that's going to dominate the agenda here at the G20 Summit. Camera person Surendra Hansipal, ED News, Hamburg, Germany.
Well, time for us to head into a short commercial break. We'll be back in a short while. Stay tuned and keep watching TD News.